Good evening. I'm going to open the June 11th Planning Board meeting, and we will start with the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on our agenda is a lot line adjustment for William and Nancy Slumbo, map block lot 612, lots 1 and 2, and I believe that they have a representative here who will present the plan. And when you get up to the podium, if you would just state your name for the record.
Dennis took my easel, so I'll have to hold it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. My name's Dan Nally. I work for Dennis Quintel, who's the principal for the business who generated the plan we're going to talk about. Here to answer any questions anybody has technically, as far as the plan itself, drafting, any questions. You know, we're taking a lot that was previously oversized, and we're reducing it considerably, but the overall, you know, lot configuration that we're coming up with meets the state requirements. Pending approval of the plan, I'd get state subdivision approval, place that on the plan. I don't really know that there's much to talk about unless you have specific questions.
Do you have questions from the board?
What, I'm sorry, I wanted to interrupt just with one thing. Actually, Nancy had told me there was an existing shed shown on lot 2-1 that's since been removed. It's not to be relocated, it's to be removed.
the one
It's
by
to
the
be
greenhouse.
removed, so when I do the final Mylar, I'll just take that off.
Okay,
So that one's not there anymore.
So that's gone.
okay. Does the board have any questions?
It's not a question, it's, this is technically a lot line adjustment. They are not creating any new building lots by doing this.
Right.
While it does need state subdivision approval because it's changing the lot size, technically for a lot line adjustment, no public hearing is needed because you're not creating any new lots. It meets all of your regulations. I mean, it's a little bit of a interesting lot, but it meets all of the size requirements, all of the setback requirements. The existing structures are allowed to stay where they are because of the existing lot lines. So from that standpoint, it is a simple lot line adjustment. It doesn't change any development potential either.
Okay. Does anybody on the board have any questions?
Well, did they do a lot line adjustment form? Don't we have one of those? It wasn't in the packet. So,
Yes.
We use the standard.
Yeah,
This
the
is
standard
it.
application is.
This form that we have is for everything.
Yeah.
oh, I thought we used to we got a lot line adjustment one from the assessor lady the last time. when we
No,
did
that's,
the lot.
that's for a voluntary lot merger. That's a different one,
That was a different one.
yeah. So this is our standard form that we use, and it's sort of used for everything.
Yeah, sorry, the merger.
That's okay.
I should point out too that pending approval of the plan, we still would have to set monuments, get a certification of monumentation.
Right, that would be one of the conditions. Right.
I have no questions.
I just have one on this building, the existing shed on like in the middle.
Yep,
Yes,
Is that new lot line more than like 25 feet away from that?
absolutely.
Okay.
I can drop a scale on it if you want to see
Well,
it.
that's what I was trying to measure my finger. It looks like it was.
Yeah, it actually,
way far.
it looks to
Like
be
if you
about
take
50
a look
feet
to the
from the...
left, Jennifer,
Sandra, yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's your scale.
We go way back.
Yeah.
If we go back to the setback on the left-hand side, that kind of
What
gives
is
you a
this?
sense of scale.
Yep.
And then just kind of project that
What's
over
the
the other
scale
side,
of this?
you can see it's probably
1
35,
inch
40
equals
feet
40
off.
feet.
right. I just have a request, if
What do you,
this
Here's the
line that
41.
goes diagonally across is a utility
You got
line.
like 60 feet?
Right at the smallest point there, where that line goes between the further edge and the new lot line.
I think you're probably looking at a fence line.
This,
Can you point that out?
this line right here.
That's 70,
Is that
that's a
a- is
fence
that a
line.
fence
That's
or-
an existing fence.
That's a
And there-
fence.
There should be like an existing fence typical note on there.
Okay, on the small plan, you can't really see that it's that thing. Okay, if it's a fence, I'm sorry.
I think we're doing the big one.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Do we have any abutters that have any questions?
Yeah, could we get a copy of that so we can really see what you're talking about?
There's one over there on the table that you could take a look at.
As a butters,
Ma'am, if you're gonna speak, I'm gonna need you to come to the podium and identify yourself first. Yeah, you can just maybe like sit right there or something if they're gonna come to the podium. Give them a chance to take a look at that plan.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
You might want to appoint,
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you, okay, and I will appoint Ms. Allen as a voting member in place of Mr. Holland, thank you. I had it on my list too, and I did not look at my list. Yeah.
While we're waiting. I just looked at the legend. Would you put the fence designation on the legend?
Okay, if you would identify yourself, please, sir?
Yeah, Joe DeLucas, 26 Whittier Street.
Okay,
Butter
thank,
to the Slumbos.
okay, thank
This-
you.
This lot was subdivided back some time ago, I presume, with this adjusting of the lot line,
Where are you looking on the
right
plan?
behind the existing greenhouse. That's the lot line that you want to,
There are two existing lots of record, yes.
they're creating two lots out of
No,
one?
there is already there is already two lots that are both owned by the applicants. They are changing one of the internal lot lines, so it's just making the two lots a slightly different shape, but it's still only two building lots. So
Okay.
they're not creating any new lots, and it's not affecting the outside boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, anyone else? Okay. Do I have a
Madam Chair, I'll move
board?
to approve the lot line adjustment.
Sandra, second. With
with one of the
conditions?
Well, I was just going to get to that.
Okay,
Figure I'd let Gail write.
okay,
One condition is to add the fence to the legend. That way, future people are not trying to figure out what that is. And you had one about the bounds?
yeah,
Yeah.
we have to set the bounds,
Right, and
right,
that we said,
set the
but
bounds.
And you also want
And
state
the-
subdivision approval?
I was just going to say, and all
And-
state and local permits and approvals. That's sort of boilerplate.
Okay. I don't think we need anything else. Oh, and you will take this shed off of the plan, too. That doesn't have to be a condition, but you already know that you're going to do that since it's not there anymore. Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second with conditions? Yes. Okay. All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, your lot line is granted, and we will, when the plan, the amended plan is brought to us, then we will go and record it as the process usually is. Okay? Thank you. Yes, you may take that. Okay.
Do I need to get one of those to Andrea?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
actually, no, when the new ones come in that are corrected,
You know what?
we need one for the assessor, we need one for conservation,
Right.
and one for our own records.
Did you happen to check with him? If he got that lot number from Andrea? Or did he get- all right. We may, I'll take one of those and I'll show it to Andrea just to make sure whether he got the lot number from her.
The lots are already pre-numbered.
We didn't add a lot.
Oh, okay, it's just moving the line.
Right,
Okay,
yeah, so
that's
so the
fine.
numbers will stay the same.
You're right, I'll just say the same.
So don't forget, when you, excuse me? When you do the Mylar, we need three paper copies.
Yep. Mylar and 3 paper copies.
And one 11 by 17, please. Thank you. Okay, thank you all.
Where'd they get the new chairs?
Oh.
What?
Fire department.
Oh.
Fire department, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice, huh?
The audience is going to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing?
You're assuming the
Yeah, that's a
audience
good
is
thing.
going to be existent.
I had one about it on there, so. Yeah, the other one's right. Okay, the next item on our agenda is to go over the subdivision stormwater regulations, and
Everybody
Jen
have
has
it?
sent, given us a copy. Well, Jen sent it, and Gail made the packet, and it's pretty straightforward as to what's coming out and what's replacing it, and it's basically the same thing that we went over.
Yes, there is a very small change from what we did with site plan, but it's because these are subdivision regulations,
Right.
so. We would be removing all of 8.2.3 of your stormwater regulations in your subdivision.
Right.
We're taking a little bit of, similar to what we did with site plan, taking some of the purpose statement and weaving it into the purpose statement of these regulations. Again, basically verbatim from the site plan regulations. The one difference, and that's really it starts on line 63 and goes down to line 66, is we're adding in that, because these are subdivision regulations, and most towns have taken the approach that they don't want this to apply to currently existing residential lots. New residential lots, depending on how they're being developed, are subject sort of during the construction phase or if they have a large area of disturbance. So this would be for subdivisions that involve a roadway construction, of which Newton has had a fair bit in the past decade, of road extensions, a couple of new roads. It would actually not apply to when you are having just a 2-lot subdivision. Also, if you are having a subdivision that will result in residential units that are duplexes. So that would just be you're having 2 dwelling units per lot, I should say. If you're having a subdivision that will have duplexes on 5 different lots and you'd have 10 dwelling units, that would still apply.
Okay, all right.
The other thing that can come into this is if you are having a development that is going to disturb a large area. A recent example would be the South Main Street subdivision that we had that had a couple of lots with the very long driveways. Those were going to be disturbing a fairly large area for that size of a subdivision. Because of the disturbance component, those could be subject to these regulations because they are adding to the stormwater in such a volume and disturbance. That one very long driveway that went to the very back on that
Right.
subdivision, we had a lot of discussion about that. And some of the drainage components that they will have to design their drainage infrastructure as it comes towards the town roads and state roads to accommodate these higher levels of stormwater runoff.
All right, is that nothing that we already told them that they needed to do?
Well, they don't need
They don't
to.
apply, they're just
Oh,
my
you're
example.
You're using it as an example,
Just as
I'm
an
sorry.
example. So anybody that has come in, and until we adopt this, goes by what's currently there.
Okay,
If we do have, if we need to go through this in any length, if we do have somebody come in The one thing that I would recommend we do for any subdivision that comes in is we start requiring that reporting component, which we could just do as a condition of any approval, that they have to report that any stormwater drainage they've put in is matching what is, and they're reporting that it's functioning as designed. So that's, if we have somebody come in the next few months and we haven't gotten this adopted,
Right.
let's do that one caveat, but it would be only new applicants that would come in. This has the same, you'll remember we discussed the threshold of applicability, so what size project and what disturbance level, that kicks this in. For smaller projects, if they're disturbing less than 2,500 square feet, which on most subdivisions, you're disturbing more area than that, so the vast majority would not qualify for it. You do not have to follow the stormwater regulations because you're not contributing that much. You still need to maintain that basic premise of you can't add more stormwater onto roads, additional properties if you're developing. But you don't have to have the same level of reporting and best management practices built in the way these regulations require.
Okay.
Other than that, they are exactly the same as the site plan regulations.
Okay, all right.
And I noticed every one of our little changes made it into this.
Honestly, I took it verbatim and copied and pasted and then changed the sections I knew needed to change because they're subdivision regulations.
Right.
I will say, I think I missed one of the references that in site plan are supposed to be our 7.2.3 and
Yeah.
these are 0.2.3. I'll go through, I think I missed a handful of those.
Yeah,
I'll go through and make sure.
I've got a couple of editorial things that,
Yeah, some of it's just, it's pointing to, but I know, I noticed it when I was running through this earlier. But the language is exactly the same.
Okay,
I need to go through and make sure the references are correct, and Roger's probably done that for me at this point.
well, I didn't find the right reference to that one, but I don't know. Do we want to sort of start going through specific things,
you
or?
have questions, I think, yeah? If
Yeah,
anybody has questions.
my first question is on line 95,
Line 90.
where
The section 5,
Yeah, it's the things that the regulations are applicable to. In the existing ones that we have now, you've got, the construction of the roads and the disturbance of environmental sensitive areas and the disturbance of critical areas. Should that also be added here, or are you saying that just having the 5,000 square feet is going to catch all of that stuff anyway?
well, it's going to catch some of it, and the other thing is you still have wetlands regulations that need to be followed. You still have aquifer overlay districts that need to be followed. So that's on top of any of the subdivision regulations. And the other point for that statement is defined environmentally sensitive areas or disturbed critical areas to me beyond wetlands, aquifers, forest, things that you already have setbacks and no structures allowed in.
Okay.
I guess that's sort of
That's sort of questions as I was reading it through. Now, my next question is on line 98,
okay.
where number 2 starts off with waivers, that
Yep.
first sentence. And then the next sentence says the following activities are considered exempt. Should that be number 3? Make that a separate paragraph. You've got waivers is one paragraph and exempt is the next paragraph.
Because they're exempt, they wouldn't need to ask for a waiver.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I
can make it-
Drop it down and make it a new paragraph.
Okay.
Okay, make that number 3.
I understand that, but my only caution is that if we change that, it's gonna start to look different than your site plan regulations.
Is that how it's worded in the other one?
This is exactly how it is in the,
Okay.
I think it's fine either way.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not big on it.
So are we putting 3 in, or are we leaving it the way it is?
That's at your,
I don't have a problem either way. It works linguistically this way, but making it a
I
separate
think it would
bullet-
be better the other way. If people don't feel that way, that's fine too.
No.
It's not a
Three
big deal.
also makes
Yeah.
sense.
Right, it does.
I think you can go either way. That's my one caveat is it will look different.
At least in theory, most people are not looking at both of them at the same time.
Well, that's
Right.
true, that's true. And
That's
I would
true.
suggest, since this one happens to be subdivision, maybe we do want to number that number 3. Just
That's
bring
fine.
it down.
Okay.
Just one thing, on line 95, it says, this is when you're disturbing more than 2,500 square feet within 100 feet of a surface water body as defined in section 5. It is not defined in your subdivision regulations. It is defined, what's one of the things we added was a surface water definition to site plan. Do you want to add the same thing, the same surface water definition to what we did for site plan in subdivision regulations?
Okay, that would go in the append.
No, that would go in the definitions section in your
Okay.
subdivision. That's
I
what
think
that's,
that that would be good.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
good.
okay.
Yeah.
That's
Because
the one
they're-
thing that's definitely
People are
does
not
not
going to want to
have.
look in a different section
Right.
Yeah.
for their definition.
Right.
I will say that some of the things that are in here still sort of sound like you're doing a site plan. The one caveat I will say is if someone were to come in and want to do a development that was both a subdivision and a site plan, they're doing a site plan with 15 apartments and then they want to condominiumize them. That's the reason why some of the language in here sort of sounds like site plan language with parking lots and drives being mentioned.
right.
That's the reason for that
So it
language.
covers everything.
It covers everything by doing that.
Well, that's what actually, I'm not going to hone in on Roger's list, but starting on 128, salt storage areas.
If you were to have a multifamily that was
That-
gonna get
that explains it
subdivided,
completely.
or a site plan that's commercial, but has condominiumized commercial units, they will have salt storage.
Okay, yep.
So, it just kind of covers every possibility.
My next question is on line 117.
Okay?
You talk about you want low-impact techniques, and you want to minimize or disconnect impervious areas?
Disconnecting impervious areas, what that is referring to is that you don't want to have somebody, let's say you've got a parking lot, the driveway, and then it's emptying onto a town road. You want to have it constructed so that driveway or that access that's coming onto the town road, a state road, that impervious surface is stormwater is designed so that it is not entering onto the town road. It is being treated on site. That can be with slopes, that can be with BMPs, that can be with swales, it can be with a little berm, so it's not, that's what that is focused on.
Okay.
That's kind of more of a water quality liability than a true reduction.
Okay, line 187. Shouldn't Table 1 be Appendix A? So I think you call it Appendix A, not Table 1.
Yes.
And next thing, in that paragraph that starts on 209.
Yep.
You're talking about de-icing and salt storage areas.
Primarily.
Should there be something about it needs to be treated?
You can't treat salt. There's no treatment for removing salt out of water in that regard, unless you have a small desalinization plant, which I don't think we're at technologically. So salt storage is basically, you cover it and how you handle it when it's exposed, or any other de-icing.
But like, snow storage areas. So you've got, they plow the driveway, they salted the parking lot, now they plow it,
Yep,
and the snow piles up someplace.
yep.
How do you control the runoff with that salt in it?
So there's effectively nothing you can do about the salt that's in that snow pile. The only way to deal with the salt that's in that snow pile is to reduce the amount of salt going onto that parking lot, which there are methodologies of doing that and keeping it as safe as can be. But the salt storage area is because it's gonna have things like fertilizers that'll get captured. It's gonna have oil and grease, so allowing it the ability of the time for it to infiltrate into the ground and slow it down, especially for solids like the sand that you may put down, or any phosphorus or nitrogen, will help treat that storm water. That's why you wanna know where the location is, so you know that when they're plowing and they're not just putting it directly into the wetland, they're putting it in a.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You're talking about where it is.
Yep.
But don't you need to be careful about where it runs off from the snow pile if it doesn't absorb right away?
But that's what you're able to tell by showing where it is. You know where it's
Right.
gonna run.
And I
Because
think
they can't estimate the
The
volume.
next paragraph talks about just a description of measures that will be used to minimize salt use.
Right, yeah.
Well, I mean, and don't we also have the ability, if it's a, say, a parking lot for a development or whatever, to say, okay, and over here is wetland, so your snow area is over here. You have to store you have to plow over to this section.
That's why one of the reasons we
Right.
say,
Okay.
you're
So
not
we
just,
can require them to put
Yeah,
it in
okay.
a certain place.
you're not just pushing it directly into your detention basin, that if we then
Right.
get some spring rains, it's
Right.
so that's why you wanna just show where are you putting it, because you can't know the volume necessarily. If it gets to a certain point where they have to just put snow everywhere, they should be trucking it off-site to a location that can deal with the snow volume.
242. That's the way the reference to section 723. I don't know what the right reference is, but that one isn't the right one.
Oh, in all honesty, it really is just 823.
Oh, okay.
Or is the
that-
spacing gonna change a little?
There's a couple of the paragraphs that are wonky. This is how they look in your current regulations. This is kind of the,
Because on, well, line 219, it starts like number 11, but then it goes to the top of the next page, so I didn't know, like, to make sure.
oh yeah,
Page break goes.
we can make sure
Oh,
there's
yeah,
a
that's-
better page break.
Page break goes with the, because
Yeah,
then you go to
the
the next
heading
page.
will go with
Heading
the,
will go with the.
Right.
go on.
Yeah, that can be done once we get it inserted.
Yeah, once it's approved, this all has to get worked in.
Right, and we're gonna have to like renumber this section and everything because we're putting a lot more pages in than
Well,
where
yeah.
it was there. We're putting about what, 12 pages
Yeah,
where
but
there
it'll
was 2
stay,
paragraphs.
it'll stay as section, if you want to, it can just stay as section 8.2.3, because your next section goes into driveways, access, and road design. So, but I agree, yeah, right now it's half a page and it's gonna turn into 12 pages.
Sure.
Yeah,
And that's fine.
and the whole thing will have to be repaginated so
Sure,
that we
yeah,
can,
we'll
you
do
know.
that.
Yeah, the table of contents will need to change, but it can really just get stuck in, and then the numbering for the next driveway section doesn't have to change at all.
Right.
Yeah.
412.
Ooh, we're skipping through the streets.
Well, we have gone over most of this language.
The last sentence.
Yes. Now, that talks about if they don't do their inspection, that the town can go in and inspect.
Right.
But should we add there that there's going to be a expense, the inspection will be done at the expense of the
Of the landowner.
landowner?
That is elsewhere in your regulations that you can do that.
Okay.
I mean, we can add that if you would like, but it's actually already in state law that you can do that. But we can, it's in your site plan regulations, we can add it to this for clarity.
I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to have it here too.
Yeah.
Because again, somebody's not gonna look over at the other
Right.
section to know
Right.
that. So, at the landover. Okay. And this Appendix A is the same as,
But I have a
Yeah.
question. Can you explain channel protection volume? The third thing from the bottom, on the table.
the appendix.
Yes, that is making sure that the inlet or the outlet for I'm gonna use a detention basin for ease, can handle that volume of water that needs to exit during that rainstorm event and can be treated. That's what the channel volume is for.
So that's something that would be recognized by the engineer who was doing that function on the
Yep.
plan. Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't quite understand so that's sort of to make sure that the channel is big enough to handle the water coming out.
Yes.
But if
Because think of it this way, you're still allowed on any site. Any site in town, doesn't matter, developed, not developed, there's a certain amount of water that still sheds off of that parcel, because water doesn't
Right.
care about our boundaries. So if it's before you construct something and after you construct something, you can keep that same volume of water coming off. Can the new infrastructure handle the additional load plus that natural amount that's coming off? It's just making sure the channel is that size.
I guess why do you, if it's more than the 2-year storm, why do you only have to do half of the?
That is getting into a level of engineering I am not sure of, but I can ask my.
So not only that I don't know the answer, you don't know the answer either. Okay,
I do not claim to be an engineer.
yeah,
These, I believe, are quotes from,
This is from the DES Stormwater Manual Volume 2.
yeah.
thank you.
This is the exact table.
Yeah, I wasn't
Most current
questioning
issue.
what it should be. I was just sort of hoping to understand.
No, I read it a couple of times and I went, it's
Right,
gobbledygook of engineer speak.
okay. You've come to the end of my comments.
Wow.
Yay! Good job, Roger.
So I can make those handful of changes.
Shame, I didn't read the whole, well, I have a couple other editorial things.
Sure.
Maybe on sentence 63. The standard applies to all projects subject, I think you said to the Town of Newton subdivision regulations. Add a two
Yes.
in there.
Yes.
Yes.
And then on line 71, there should be a comma between decrease and modify.
What do you want to put there?
71.
71.
Yeah,
A comma
Comma
between
between
decrease
and modify.
yeah.
That's also far. That's as far as I read.
Okay, that's good. All right, so, I think what would be good is if you could make the changes we talked about and give us a new copy, and then we'll just take a look at it one more time, and then we can put it for public hearing.
Sure. And even if we put it to public hearing and there's a comma that doesn't
Well,
change the
that's
meaning,
minimal,
then we
yeah,
can
right.
but-
Yeah, like you said, the real meat of it was pretty much cut and paste. And
Correct,
Yes.
which is good,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, that's good.
Does everybody want a new printout?
I
with
do.
those
I don't need
I don't need a new
I
printout.
don't need a printout.
After the changes?
Right.
Right, because I understand what the changes are there.
I can
You
send
can-
them
You can make one for
electronically.
Roger.
Roger.
And I know what you did last night, too.
Actually, I did it this morning.
Sandra, do you
really
want
good bedtime
a clean
reading.
one
What?
too then?
It's good bedtime reading.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay, all right.
It's the advantages of being retired.
I'm going to put the board packets together. You know how long it took to print out all of these pages? Notice the little strip attached just in case?
Right, so hang on to this. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I'd rather, that's half a tree.
I can bring the copies that I send a PDF of, but
Okay, sounds good.
All right, I'll finish reading it later.
just as
In
a.
that case, Madam Chair, I would move,
Oh, I just have a quick side note related. I've reviewed your illicit discharge elimination ordinance that Mike Vignali has been working on, that I think will be before the select board in the next couple of weeks. Your
That's
town-
what
your-
I'm hoping, because I've already been asking where it is.
Your town council, I don't believe has reviewed it quite yet because simply because he hasn't gotten it. There's not a whole lot that's really impactful of planning per se, but that's the one other piece that you guys don't have control over for ordinances that is coming up. So Mike and I have worked with Nancy to
Yeah.
get
and
that. So I
as-
think it'll be close
It's
to
going to be
being
like a
ready.
selectmen's ordinance?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right. That part
And
of
as soon as everything's ready, that we will be voting on that. I've already warned the Board of Selectmen about
it, all
it.
right.
Didn't you
I
say
got-
that had to be done by the end of this month?
So per the permit, the MS4 permit, yes, that along with the stormwater management plan has to be done by the end of June. The town has until October 1st to actually report on its progress for the first year. The general approach EPA has taken with MS4, as long as you are moving towards it, they're generally okay if if it's a couple of weeks, they're not gonna come after you. The same thing with the stormwater management plan. You do not have to submit that to EPA, you just have to have it on file so it's accessible. So it has to be in the binder in the selectman office.
And EPA will, throw a dot at the state of New Hampshire and go,
Wanna come
yeah,
see."
check that town,
Yep.
throw another dot,
Yeah.
check. So you have to have it.
Right.
Right.
But, they, in order to have somebody sitting in Washington reading all these regulations,
It would be Boston, but yeah. And I believe your stormwater management plan is very close. Mike Vignali's waiting on a few things from Mike Pavera. But from what I gathered, it was not very much, so it's probably very realistic. It'll be done by the end of the month.
Okay.
So.
Good. Great.
very good. In that case, Madam Chair, with those corrections, I will move to bring the Newton subdivision regulations stormwater management update to a public hearing probably the beginning of July.
Do we have a meeting date scheduled?
July 9th would be your first meeting?
Right.
Yep, July 9th. Okay, so we'll put it on the agenda for
Because
July
it
9th.
has to be noticed.
Right. Great. Okay. Do I have a second?
Oh, second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye, okay, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is acceptance of the May 14th minutes.
Move to accept.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
It's unanimous, thank you. Did you get everybody? Yeah. Okay, that's good. Okay, manifests? Okay, operating budget, postage, and RPC annual meeting fee,
Yeah,
I
that's
guess it's fee. All right, so for a total of $78.70.
Move to pay.
Do I have a second? Thank you. All those in favor?
All right.
Unanimous, thank you. NEPA expense for the lot line adjustment that we just heard today, for the
Slumber.
packets and for the newspaper advertisement, $112.29.
Move to pay.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right,
Thank you. Correspondence.
Got an email from Todd Fitzgerald.
Oh,
He
Okay.
wants 3,500, his balance is at 4,200, so he'll be leaving 700.
okay. Mr. Fitzgerald is asking for a partial release of NEPR funds in the amount of $3,500.
He's got $4,221 in his
Right.
account,
And it will leave how much, did you say?
$700.
It'll leave about $700 in the NEPR. He's asking for the refund, partial release after the crushed hot top is in place for Curryville.
He's looking for the decrease now.
Oh,
He's leaving $700 in there.
Oh,
so that
okay, I'm sorry.
town
You're
engineer
right,
doesn't
okay.
bother anything.
So he would like a partial release of his NEPR funds.
Did he do the work?
It's Curryville,
It's Curryville.
Right.
so it's already been recorded. He had asked for money back in our last meeting. We didn't know if there'd be an engineering
Right, we asked him to
fees.
make an official request because he
Yeah.
just said something in the going by, so.
Oh, actually, from the NEPR, yeah, because didn't he post a bond for the
He's got a
road?
road bond.
Mm-hmm.
okay, so this is separate from the road bond.
Correct, he's got
Yes.
the road bond in
Okay.
place.
Okay, that-
Requested
Yeah.
a
Yeah, right.
reduction. We asked him to put it in writing. but
Yeah,
he
let
needed
let me see that
$700.
too.
Yeah, because actually,
So it's just some concern that there may be some engineering fees and stuff because of the
because of the road.
water and stuff like that. Right, when they come out to check the road. But technically, once it's recorded, we generally,
He released the NEPR.
Right,
Because
right.
where it
And
is.
And if the engineer has to go out one more time and look at it, I think the $700 will well cover it.
I was just going to say he has to pay, or it comes out of the road bond.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's going to leave $700
Yeah.
in there, so if something needs to be paid for.
Yeah, because there shouldn't be a lot of additional work
No,
that
I don't.
the engineer would need to do.
Right, I don't think so, maybe
So
one
it's
last
not
look.
like a real,
Yeah, it's not like Puzzle Lane where you have all
right,
sorts
a
of.
lot of things that you really, until it's done,
Yeah.
Right,
you need the engineer to keep going back. This one here, as long as, okay. You want to see this?
No,
What?
I'll move that we release 3,500 from the Curryville Road Project NEPR account to Father and Son.
do I have a second? Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
All right,
Okay, that's
yeah,
unanimous.
as long as the road bond's still in place.
Right.
That's the more
Got the road
important
bond
thing.
to fall back on.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where you still may need to actually get some money.
Well, actually, in the road bond
Okay.
is an engineering component.
You're right.
Okay, it's time to approve our circuit rider contract. Can you tell us if there's been an increase?
There has been a $2 an hour increase. The rest of it has stayed exactly the same minus dates.
So how much does that,
Should be listed, it's on the first page, I believe, the bottom of the first page.
no, I was just wondering what the price was last year. In other words, how much
Six-
more are we paying this year than the last? one?
$2 per hour, so
How many
How many hours?
so divide the
On the
total
back.
cost by 70, and that's how many hours you got last year. And then times it by 68, and that's how much you paid last year.
I just always kind of like to know how much we increased it, that's all.
I think you get about 200 hours of technical assistance.
No, I was just wondering how much
I'm just
more
trying-
money
Yeah, yeah.
is this
Okay,
year.
it's 183 hours, so if we're looking at $2 per hour, we're looking at,
A little under $400.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about a $400 increase, that makes sense.
Okay, that's all right.
which we will need to remember when we go into the budget cycle.
Right, right, okay. So,
So
I need a
I will
motion whether we're
move to
going to accept
sign
this or not.
the,
I don't think we sign it, I think we have to,
Send it to selectmen?
we send to, we, we
well, flip
tell
to
the
flip to the
selectmen.
signature page. It says Chairman of the Planning Board.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
I
I think
move that
because
we-
it's your budget, that's why we
Right.
send it
Okay.
that way.
I will move to sign the circuit rider contract.
do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
All right,
Okay, thank you. I'll do that in a minute.
We like putting people on tender hooks.
It's fine.
And lastly is, Town of Newton,
Oh, this is just a
just to let everybody know.
FYI,
Yep, we got it in the mail yesterday.
request for project review by the New Hampshire Division of Historical Societies.
what is it?
I'm not sure. Here, I'm not sure what that is. It's the first I saw it. I think it's just an FYI and something about
This is a
stormwater.
request for project review for the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources, and it regards the Newton Stormwater Management Program.
Something
Is there a
written.
possible amendment
Yeah,
worried about?
so part of the MS4 permit, and I'd have to go back to look at yours specifically, but is you have to say, we're not going to be harming any endangered species, or if we are, this is how we're gonna deal with it. And we're not gonna be harming any historic resources of
That-
which there
that- that's
was
exactly-
criteria A, B, and C, of which you most likely did B, that we will not be harming any historical structures over the
Oh, it's like
course of our.
Indian artifact kind of things or whatever?
No, I mean, the town hall is a historic structure under section 106. And so anything over 50 years is eligible to be listed as a national
Yeah.
historic structure. That doesn't mean everything that's over 50 years is historically significant. It just is, that's the first cut for criteria for it maybe. But it can also be artifacts and things of that nature.
So we put that in our stormwater thing somewhere?
There is a small statement that says, but basically that when you are doing your stormwater management, best management practices and education, that you will not be harming historic structures, or if you may, for some reason, if you were to do something at town hall that may harm the cemetery or a town hall or your,
Yep.
something else in town that may be older, that you're not sending stormwater like directly into the basement of the town hall, that will compromise the historic structure.
However, this is actually to the selectman's office. They just send it's a,
FYI.
It's an FYI, but if there's something that's
If there's something in there
we
that
need
she,
to add-
that Nancy may need help with answering for the selectmen,
Right.
I'd be happy to help.
I mean,
but-
what they, on the back, they've checked off that it's, additional information is needed in order to complete the review, but they don't list what the additional thing is. The comments are, specific projects to be evaluated when identified. Projects have potential to have effect on historical properties. They're referring to town-wide. The Division of Historical Resources recognizes the town's commitment to coordinate with the District of Historical Resources to avoid, minimize, or mitigate adverse effects. They don't say what the additional information is. that they're-
Okay, so is this something that we got just as a copy for us as an FYI? And
Yeah,
so town administrator and selectmen actually are
Right.
going to deal with this?
Right.
Okay, all right. And if there's something that's mentioned in here that we have to add to our stormwater thing then?
No. Part of applying for the permit to be allowed to discharge stormwater into waters of the US, so you applied to be able to do that, that's why it's called a permit for the MS4 permit, is you have to say that we are not adding, our stormwater will not destroy historic resources, and it's on the very first page, and there's the 4 criteria, and I believe you guys did B, which is if we identify that we may be harming historic structures during the execution of our stormwater plan or meeting the regulations, then we will work with historic resources to mitigate any potential negative effects on historic structures.
Okay, so it's already on a form that they have to
Yes,
fill out.
it's
so
already
we
on a
don't have to
form,
add
you've
it.
already,
Remember, not only do we have to complete an MS4, the state has to complete an
Right,
MS4.
that's true.
DOT, so New Hampshire as a state is not, it's considered not a delegated state. We don't implement the stormwater program, which most states do. But DOT is because it's actually the largest landowner in the state of New Hampshire, as a little factoid, has to comply with their own MS4. It's a little bit different than what a
Right.
municipality does, but they have their own MS4 permit. So they have to deal with the same environmental impacts, the same historic resources impacts.
That reads like it's the state looking for information to complete their own versus
I
an
actually
oversight.
suspect that because it's a federal permit, that you never sent any of your permit forms to Concord, you sent them to Boston.
Right.
They don't have access to some of the information, so EPA may have notified historic resources. These communities may be potentially doing projects that could have the potential to impact historic resources.
Okay.
And they're just kind of trying to close that loop.
Right. Okay. I think that's all we have?
I have a question.
Yes.
A few months ago, we approved the site plan stormwater.
Yep.
But those new regulations are not on the website. How do we, I mean, I assume it's not worth redoing the whole regulations on the website until we finish the thing we
Well,
did today.
that was, I was going to do that while Gail was out. However, I looked at it and realized that with that packet having to go in there,
But in the meantime, would it be wise to also just put the amendment that we approved on the website?
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah,
As a separate-
I think that would be good.
You know, that way there, it will be available to.
That way if somebody comes up, they
You know,
know.
otherwise, you know.
Correct.
Yeah, just take the document that we approved at the public hearing and
So,
post that on the website with the other regulations.
If I haven't had any, but if I were to have somebody come in, or Gail, have somebody come in that was asking about something that may constitute a site plan, please be very aware, the town just adopted their new stormwater regulations. So towns that
Yep.
I've gone through this with,
Right.
it's gonna take about a year before the people that you see routinely, sort of the Dennis Quintel, Todd Fitzgerald, so those groups, the people that come in a fair bit before they get used to seeing them on the books.
actually,
But-
somebody did come in from Mr. Quintel's company and asked for a copy.
Oh,
That
of the
was-
new? Oh, good.
And
That was a couple of months ago.
Okay. Did we
you
give it
have
to 'em?
nothing.
Yeah, I was here, I asked and
So-
I had it, so I printed it out and handed it
Many
to
of
him.
the neighboring towns have already adopted exactly the same thing or slightly different versions, so.
But I just thought it'd be good to have it on the
Yeah, no, that's a good
website.
idea.
And just to drop that thing in the
Right.
meantime. And
Yeah, I just looked at it and went, no, I can, because once we've had, towards the end of July.
it's gonna need a
we'll be
major
getting a whole
revision.
new section for
Right.
our binders.
Right,
Right, so and then we could just upload everything back there,
right.
back up onto it after.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm assuming that it's just the site plan and the subdivision, there's no other part.
No,
Of our regulations.
There's nothing with excavation related to this. There are some other things in your site plan and subdivision regulations I would love to work on, but it doesn't have to be part of this.
Anything in particular that we should be aware of?
Very specifically, I would like to remove some of the components that are currently actually in your procedures document
Uh-huh.
and move them back into the site plan and subdivision regulations, like your minor site plan requirements. I would like to pull that back into the site plan regulations,
I think
just as
that's
a
good idea.
Because I personally
You
have
have to
tabs
look
in
in three
here.
different places to
Yeah.
find out what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, we talked a long time ago, along that thing, that we didn't really like this form that
Yes.
is for everything. So, what I did was, I just made some copies of an existing one from the neighboring town, so that you could take a look at it to see if you thought something like this would work for Newton, okay? So this is what you, and you can take a look at it. All right, so just pass that, please,
So-
the whole
so-
thing,
So
the whole thing.
this is,
The one that's on the top is what we have existing, and the one that's on the bottom is what a neighboring town uses, which, pass it all the way back, all that way.
I don't
No,
need a
that's-
I've seen this so many times, I don't need a copy of it, I just know how infuriating it is.
Okay, just,
Jen, do you want a copy?
so would we do different application forms for different things? Like
I think
that's
so,
what-
because that's
do
the-
one application form for site plans, do a
Yes.
separate application form for subdivisions?
So most,
that's
not all
what we
towns.
do over there.
Most towns will have site plan, so major site plan, minor site plan, subdivision, and we'll say a lot line adjustment
Right.
sometimes.
Yep,
Conditional use permit, so that, it's got you've got
The
a
right
space for the different-
questions for each.
yep,
Yep.
yep.
And maybe not just a general conditional use permit one that has, if there are criteria, you list out the criteria and please answer to that criteria depending on what it is. Home occupation, although you guys have
Yeah,
home
I was gonna say,
occupation.
that's the one that we did, right?
Right, that's the one you did.
But you have, it would be nice to have one for accessory dwellings.
Oh, I can give you copies of everything, then we could just tweak them, if you'd like.
I
I'll
mean,
do that.
it makes more sense to have a whole set of application forms.
Sure.
It does, because every single one of those, with the exception of a full site plan, you flip it over and you go NA, NA, NA. But I've got to, Gail has to print out, basically it's 4 sheets or 2 double-sided sheets, because the signature's way at the end.
Right.
And you can't, she can't send out half a document. So it's like,
The other thing you don't have as part of your just general application packet, you may not have the volume to need it, but is having a reasonable checklist of this is the information you need to have for site plan, for a subdivision, for a minor site plan, for a lot line
I
adjustment.
have all that stuff, so I will put together a packet and everybody can take a look at it. How's that?
appreciate it.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel if we could just
Right,
revise
you're right,
something.
yeah, like I said, if somebody else has already developed something that's working for them,
Do we have to pay them royalties because we took their form?
But you have to pay it to me because I'm the one.
East Kingstons are very good, I know, I've seen them. There are other towns around that it might be worth people, honestly, pick a town and look at their planning board, right? Planning board forms. See if there's something you like. I've got one town where I like their form. Their checklist I hate because it's everything under the sun and I have to explain not everybody needs to give us traffic counts all the time. So,
Right.
there's a balance
Yeah.
there. You gotta
Sure.
think about the volume that you guys get.
Okey doke. Anybody else got anything else? No.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
all right?
Aye.
Aye.